Welcome, everybody, to the first episode of the ABCA's Calls from the Clubhouse, a new podcast, and we're excited to launch it here with you today. And it connects our listeners with some of the best baseball minds in the game today. On behalf of the American Baseball Coaches Association, we'd like to sincerely thank you for listening in, and we are more than certain you're going to enjoy this great interview. My name is Jeremy Sheetinger, and with this first podcast, we wanted to spend time discussing arm health, arm training, development, especially from a pitching perspective. So to do that, you've got to round up the best teaching professionals that you can and get them on the interview. We've done that. In the first half of our interview, we're going to spend time with Alan Jaeger, the founder of Jaeger Sports and the quote-unquote godfather of the long toss program. Alan's going to discuss his revamped version of the year-round throwing manual. He's going to go into his J-band routine, the long toss program in more depth. But he's also going to talk on some very pertinent topics, such as for our high school prospects of navigating the summer, the showcase circuit, and preparing those guys to be healthy as they move into college baseball. The second half of this interview could not be more close to audio gold, as we get three of the best college baseball pitching coaches in the country together on the same call, along with Alan. We've got Nate Yeske. Nate's the assistant coach at Oregon State University. We've coupled that with Scott Brown, the associate head coach at Vanderbilt University. And to round it off, we've got the head coach in his first year at Auburn University, Butch Thompson. These are great men, but more importantly, loyal ABCA members. And we're sincerely thankful we were able to sit down with them and get them on record on these topics. Thanks for listening in. We hope you enjoy the interview, and we appreciate what you're doing for the game of baseball. Thank you.
All right, so Alan, let's get right into it, my man. How are you doing this morning?
I'm doing great, Jeremy. It's so cool to be on with you, and I really appreciate this. It's an honor, buddy.
Well, we appreciate you being on with us. I mean, you're a loyal ABCA guy. Can you give us kind of a real quick tutorial of your experience with ABCA and how important it is to you as a coach?
Yeah, well, it's ironic because I know last week you ran a bunch of small videos or a bunch of videos with Coach John Scalinas, and I think my first memory of an ABCA show, I'd have to look it up, but I believe it was Anaheim, and I just remember I walked into this room, and I really didn't know what it was at first. I mean, this might have been 20 years ago, and John Scalinas was a person I just remember being on the stage speaking, and
Sure.
So ironically, that's how far back I go with the ABCA, but I probably 7 or 8 of the last 11 years or so. I mean, I've traveled around the country. I've been to Dallas, Chicago, Nashville, I think twice now, San Diego, Anaheim, and it's just a special, special place, as you know. I mean, I'm preaching to the choir here, but it's a special place to be, and I think the idea of what's going on with as far as the trend now toward you guys really getting more and more active with the schools throughout the year and what have you. It's just a cool thing, man. You guys do a great job, and I know you guys are all about education is the bottom line, and that's why we're doing this. So it's very cool.
Well, we appreciate you being on, man. This is first episode, and we're excited to have a guy like you on. And Alan, the biggest piece for us is really having our listeners understand, man, your background in baseball is really extensive. We're talking 25 plus years of really dedicating your life and your career to the game. And I think it'd be great, man, if you could give us just a run through of your experience in baseball. And
okay, yeah, I'll be brief, man, so we can get to it. I'm from Los Angeles. I went to Granada Hills High School and then Pierce Junior College and then Cal State Northridge, and I was actually a third baseman in high school, and then I became a pitcher in college. And once my career finished, one of the reasons why I got so heavy into the mental game is when I was a junior at Cal State Northridge, I went through a very challenging time, if you will, and it just got me so intrigued and as far as like, well, what am I going through? What's going on? Because it really affected me, and I had to actually, walk away from the team at one point. So it was such a powerful moment in my life that it got me so kind of determined to find out like what went wrong, what happened here, and that led me to psychology, and psychology eventually led me to Eastern philosophy and Zen and meditation and yoga. And so I took that experience. I wrote a book in the 90s, And then I became a pitching coach for 3 years at a junior college, LA Mission Junior College, and that was wonderful because I had a chance to, as you know, get into the grind of just being with a group of guys, you know, for an entire year for 3 years. And at some point I just kind of branched out onto my own, and I started my own kind of training program, you know, if you will, training business, if you will. And I don't like the word business, but you know where I'm going.
Right.
And I started working with players privately. I did camps in summer, and then I started, which really is kind of leading us back to the year-round throwing manual. I started doing these camps for professionals that was like 2 months long from January to February, or really leading up to spring training. And the beauty of that was that I got to bring in the meditation and the yoga, but then also the throwing program, which I started to really just do it intuitively as a pitching coach at LA Mission College. It's something I did personally my whole life, so it wasn't like I thought I was teaching something that unique. I just thought everybody long toss.
Sure.
That's what I did, and I loved the long toss, and that's how I bring in my partner into this. That's how I found my partner, who was our team captain outfielder, who had an absolute cannon, because we just gravitated toward each other because we loved the long toss. So basically, the pro camp was the grounds for me where I really had a chance to be with guys for 8 weeks, and I had a chance to really cycle them, so to speak, and build them up and start to integrate mound work and really send them off to spring training in what I consider to be just phenomenal shape. And I did that for 15 years. So I feel like that's where a lot of my background came from, how to build an arm the right way, how to cycle it, how to maintenance it. And then I guess the last piece would be that, you know, aside from that, I started just getting into consulting, and I've worked with, you know, just a lot of different schools, and that experience has been helpful for me because not only does it feel good to consult and teach, but when you're around some of the people that you consider to be so good at what they do and so impressive, and they're giving you the feedback of how, you know, the positive feedback of how things are happening. That's very inspiring and motivating, and that's really what, you know, I can hang my hat on, is that it's not just the experience that myself and my partner and now our other huge help, which is, you know, China McCarney. It's like, you know, my partner, by the way, is Jim Vatcher. I think you know that, but it's like the feedback I've gotten from the coaching world and people I respect so much it's almost overwhelming. But that's what you love about this game, and I know that's a big piece of ABCA, and so that's that kind of brings you back to, you know, up to the moment of you know, at least my path in 26 minutes or less.
Well, we appreciate that. I think it's always good to have a foundation to kind of really see where you're coming from, and that, like you said, leads us right to the current moment. And for all listeners out there, know that Alan has put out his year-round throwing manual in the past, but now we've revamped it, we've relaunched it, and it's in such a great format. I'm going to let him talk about it, but also, Alan, talk about the changes, but more importantly, the purpose behind it. What was your mission in putting this together to really help young players out there? Go into that a little bit.
Well, I appreciate that because it's the bottom line. I mean, you know, the why behind it. And I think that from that pro camp, spending 2 months with guys, you know, I had them every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and even on some Sundays where we started doing some inner squatting. And I guess I just felt like, you know, in 25 years of doing this, the one thing that I can say is that, you know, I've gotten a lot of questions over the years about when to long toss, how much should I long toss, how far should I go, you know, what is the in season like, you know, if I'm a starter, if I'm a reliever, if I'm, you know, how much rest should I take now with the summer that I know we're going to get into with, you know, travel ball and showcases. You know, there's a bunch of new questions there, and then how much, you know. So I guess all these questions, you know, I've gotten so many questions over the years about, hey, I'm in Maine. You know, what do I do in December? I need a long toss, but I can't get outside for 3 more months. So all these questions I've been just getting hammered by over the years, which is beautiful. It's forced me into, you know, and I've spent hours and hours and hours answering these questions, and I really enjoy that. But I just at some point I thought, you know, and I have written an article on off season, and I have written an article on in season, and I just decided let's just tie it all together, build in the rest periods, talk about the summer, which is sort of a new world of these last 5 to 8 years or so, and so I think that was the impetus really is the bottom line, is to just put something in a format for the entire year. There's, people that know me know I'm all about options and flexibility, but the bottom line is that you got to build it up really well. Once you build it up really well, because that's the foundation of your house. Once you build it up really well,
Sure.
how do you maintenance it really well? When do you take your breaks? How do you navigate the summer, which can be maybe the trickiest part of the entire year? And so I guess that's sort of to answer your question. The bottom line is that it just was 25 years of just processing and just getting to a point where I felt like, hey, I want to be able to, if someone asks me a question, this is kind of how I wrote the manual. I wanted to answer every question that someone can ask, and I realize it's probably impossible to get every question, but that was my goal, is if there was a question someone could ask me, I can not only tell them that it's in the manual, but it will have, points of references as to the depth behind the answer, as opposed to just, well, here's the answer to that. I want them to also know why the answer, where it came from, and sort of like what would support it from, the deeper part of why I'm answering the question that way.
Sure. No,
and then sorry, yeah, and then just sorry to cut you up, but the second part to that before I forget is that the reason we're relaunching this is that the original manual, which came out, I can't remember, but maybe like September, October of last year, it just was in a smaller book form. The font was too small. I just felt like I really wanted to do this thing right, and I really was inspired by Kyle Bodie's, hacking the kinetic chain, because it was bigger, it was spiral bound. And what we did is we actually put in sections to where there's little tabs that stick out for like the off season. There's a tab for the in season. There's a tab for the summer, and so on. And so I think part of it is, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, there's sections now where you can put some notes in there. So there's some few added things to it, but essentially the content hasn't really changed. And but I think the format of it now is just 1,000 times better than the way it was.
Sure. Well, I'm glad we've introduced the manual, and I'll tell any coach that's listening, you need to do yourself a favor and look into getting this, not only for your development as a coach, but for your players and their health and their development as well. And I've seen it in person. I've seen the electronic version. I've seen the physical. It's going to be great. Now, we appreciate you, again, making it maybe more consumer friendly is a way to put it, and it's going to be sharp. And obviously, now we're going to get into those topics, though, because your book is so, the manual just absolutely lays out the plan for our coaches and our players, but sometimes it's best to hear it from the source itself. And you're going to blush, and I'm going to say it. You're the godfather of long toss, man. You're the guy that's out there in the baseball community that is so passionate about long toss. And when we think about, obviously, your program and it's centering around the band work and around long toss, we need background. Give us a background on how important those roles are, and maybe just a kind of a quick rundown of how it works.
Well, I guess in a nutshell, whenever I get asked questions about taking care of the arm, there's tons of modalities out there that I think are great. But I always tell people the same thing. At the end of the day, for us, obviously it's what we teach, so maybe we're a little biased, but I'd actually say as objectively as possible that bands to me, are just so important for the prehab part of throwing. Of course, they use bands for rehab, but we're just so big into prehab, and so we just want to get especially the shoulder girdle so heated up, and we want the range of motion, we want the small muscle balance and all that good stuff. But the idea is that you don't want to just get out there and throw right away. You want to get the arm prepared and warmed up, and because of what you do before you throw, not only is the experience, so to speak, of throwing going to be dramatically improved, but also the recovery period because of all the arm care stuff. And so recovery period is, as we talk about this maybe later, recovery period becomes one of the most important elements to keeping your arm healthy. So the band work is not just to get you warm and prepared to throw, but it's to optimize your throwing and really help with your recovery period. So bands is number one, and long toss is number two. And again, I would never make someone long toss. But at the end of the day, I would try to inform them as best I can from 25 years of experience, and experience, again, of some of the best minds in baseball I know out there, of the incredible, consistent, success, if you will, or progress from doing it. But long toss, the easiest way to explain long toss is that, number one, our program is always centered around listening to your arm. So there's a way that you always throw by letting your arm dictate how far you're going to go that day. And even though we're big into long toss, it might take you 2 or 3 weeks to get out to your furthest point. But the idea is that you stretch your arm out on the way out, so we call the first stage the stretching out phase. So as you walk away from your throwing partner, you're throwing the ball with arc, because we want the arm to stay as loose and relaxed for the entire stretching out phase. And then once you get to your furthest throw, and this might be 3 weeks down the road, the second phase of long toss is what we call the pull down phase. And basically, and you may not pull down every single day, but on a day that you feel like you need to get your pull downs and your aggressive throwing in, essentially what you'll do is you'll come in about 10 feet of throw on the way back in, and then the key is to maintain the same intent or effort of your furthest throw. So if you go out to 300 feet, and we call 300 feet X, the key is to maintain X as you get closer to your partner, and to not decelerate any of that 300 feet. And so the cool thing is that instinctively you just know to aim lower and lower and lower, and we just make sure players know if you're going to miss in front of your partner's feet rather over the head, because we want them to practice accelerating rather than decelerating. And so in a nutshell, it's the stretching out phase with arc and keeping the arm loose and relaxed, and the second phase is the pull down phase. And even in the pull down phase, we still want them thinking to be loose and relaxed, because even though we're going to get explosive and really athletic, the idea is it's an art form to learn how to stay loose and relaxed, because anybody that's been on a mound or anybody that's made a throw from the infield or outfield or catchers know that your best throws is when you're just free and easy, and then there's explosion, sort of like a golfer, making the correct swing. And so anyway, in a nutshell, that's sort of the long toss and the band phase of it, and those are the two crucial elements to our program.
Sure. I think this is a pretty good follow-up, because if you're a coach listening out there and maybe you're not as familiar with Jaeger Sports and all in your program, Alan, give them kind of what's the most important thing they need to know. If they're trying to develop and maintain a healthy arm, if they're really passionate about keeping their kids where they need to be and a platform to really grow as a player and also maintain health, give them kind of the most important thing to know moving forward.
Well, rule number one is you have to build the foundation the right way. That the most important thing, probably with anything you do in life, obviously the house is the best analogy. You got to get your frame in, and then you got the engine of the car. You've got to get your base in place, because if you get your base in place, and we even have a term in the manual called, I call it stacking the base. Not only do I want a great base, but it's almost like overkill. I want the great base to be stacked and stacked and stacked, because once you build your base, it is amazing how you can build onto that, and how that leads to endurance, how endurance leads to good recovery period. And again, we keep coming back to the same themes of what's the most important thing. Build your base for endurance reasons. But once you build your base, then of course the maintenance part, it just fits like a glove. I mean, it's easy to integrate mound work. It's easy to integrate aggressive throwing for position players, but you've got to build your base. And in our manual, which is sort of based on, I believe, I should know this, but I think it's based on a senior in high school or a freshman in college average arm strength. I think it's a freshman in college average arm strength. The idea is that it's going to probably take you at least 3 weeks to be conservative to get your arm just through the stretching out, conditioning, and base building phase, even before we do much aggressive throwing. Now, it might take 5 weeks total to get your arm to where you've really built the base and stacked it well. But the point is this: you just don't have to worry about aggressive throwing for 3 weeks. You just want to build the base the right way. And so I keep coming back to this word base. If you build your base the right way, it's the single most important thing for a coach or parent or player to know, is you have to build your base, especially for pitchers away from the mound. You have to plan on spending, I'm going to say to be conservative, 5 to 6 weeks of just building your arm to shape through long toss, through stretching it out, and eventually through the pull downs, which may come in week 4 or week 5. But that's it, man. And obviously the bands are a huge part of this, building your base through arm conditioning, band work, and so on. And then the last piece, I guess, would be the listening to the arm, because how you build your base and how you get into shape, if you get intimate with your body and intimate with your arm, you'll learn that it will dictate how far to go each day. It will dictate how many throws to make. It'll dictate how many minutes. And you don't really need a throwing program. You don't need someone to say to you this many minutes or this many throws. In fact, I think that could get in the way. It's all about listening to your arm and giving your arm a chance to breathe and dictate the pace, because it will get into amazing shape if you follow it.
I was waiting because that's about 20 minutes in. We got our first breathe reference, and we appreciate that. Now, I think the word I wrote down, Al, was freedom. As you were talking, and if I'm a coach, I think and again, I know we're going to be touching on the rehab programs, and I think most coaches are familiar with those as we've all come up. We've been subject to them at some point, but I wrote down freedom because that, to me, as a coach, as a guy who's obviously, when I was on the coaching ranks, followed your plan and completely believed in where you were and where you were trying to go. And talk about that a little bit, expand on that, because I think the freedom part of it is something that maybe is unique or different for a coach that's listening that really isn't familiar with Jaeger sports.
Well, I love the question, Jeremy, and one of the main reasons why is because some programs, whether it's professional baseball or college or high school or even travel ball, if they're in a rush, they may say, "Hey guys, you got 10 minutes to go get loose," or whatever the number is. And for me, there's never a number ever, because some guys might only need 10 minutes on a given day, which for me, that concept doesn't really exist too much, because our guys get into and maybe if you're a 6-year-old or a 7-year-old, I can get it to some degree. But even 6 and 7-year-olds, we want them at 70 feet for a while. But the bottom line is this: one of my most important principles that I talk about when I talk about, and this just goes for everybody that teaches this from our side, my partner, China. That the thing about this is that there is not a time constraint. There's not a distance constraint. If you listen to your arm and quote-unquote give it the freedom, find its path, and be instinctive and be intuitive, what will happen is that on any given day, you have no idea how many minutes. I've had pitchers, I know I've experienced this myself as a pitcher, where I've thrown a ton of pitches, and the next day I thought, I probably won't want to throw much, or I threw a lot. Maybe it's more accurate to say I threw a ton in a clinic. And I thought the next day, man, I wouldn't want to throw much. And it's just shocking if you take care of your arm really well. Even the day after a start of 100-plus pitches, you might find yourself maybe not going out real far, but your arm wants to throw some volume because it just needs it. And the word freedom is one of the most important words when it comes to practice plans and coaches kind of setting up to what a guy's going to do each day with throwing. The key is that I'd say always have at least 20 minutes, and that doesn't include band work and arm care. Have 20 minutes as a minimum to say, guys, that's the throwing station. You got at least 20 minutes. Get in when you need to. Even if you only go out to 150 feet because you want to go light today, maybe at 60 feet you want to throw 50 changeups, or you want to, just get some volume in. And so I'm really glad you asked this question, because it's really one of the most important questions, especially for coaches. And you have to get the horse out of the barn. You got to give the arm a chance to do what it needs to do. If it needs less time that day, so be it. The bottom line is give the arm a chance to expand and grow and build conditioning and build endurance. And don't put false parameters and false limitations and boundaries in the way to put the arm in a position where you may stunt it just because you said, hey, you get 10 minutes today. We work with players that, not that maybe they're going to take their time, but they need 20, 25 minutes some days. They just want to let the arm breathe and open up and stretch out. And when they come back in, they still don't want to be in a rush to go anywhere. And I'm sensitive. I know coaches have practice plans, and I know a lot of pitching coaches, what they'll do is maybe they'll start their practice an hour before everybody else. But I've always pushed pitching coaches to just say, hey, look, maybe I don't know what the number is, but if I'm a coach, I'm going to tell the head coach, look, I need an hour before you need us. If you need us for whatever you need us for, between arm care stuff, between stretching, whatever it is, I want an hour, whatever the number is. And so at the end of the day, just stay away from putting limitations and constraints on throwing. The best thing you can do is give the arm a chance to breathe, get the horse out of the barn, let it run. Let's see where it wants to go today.
Love it. Well, and obviously furthering, because I think some coaches, as you get into end season, that might be the toughest part. And I know that's the part that I always struggle with as a coach, and I know a lot of coaches, just really what is the maintenance plan in season? And you talk about that which I think would be a great opportunity to expand on. But we talk about the 5 and 7 day cycles. There's obviously not everybody's a starter, and now you've got to really handle that relief pitcher a different way. And I want you to kind of expand on those thoughts a little bit.
Yeah, well, the cool thing is this: if you build your foundation right, you have the luxury to really allow the players to dictate the in-season. And I'm going to tell you right now it's going to happen. I have a lot of evidence through a lot of coaches that coach in college and have a chance to experience this, or in high school, wherever. They have a chance to experience this from September to January and January to June. And the cool thing is that if you build it really well, you'll have players, position players or pitchers, doesn't matter. They're going to desperately, I hate to use the word desperate, they're going to be just so motivated because the body is going to want to throw more because it's what it's used to. So a lot of coaches will really, especially relief pitchers, that they won't maybe have them throw as much long toss, or especially the day of a game. And in college, you have a luxury because you're really playing 3 or 4, probably 4 games a week. There's still plenty of days to make sure that you get your pitchers, you allow them to stay in shape well by still continuing to long toss. And so the in-season piece for me is that starters are simple because we have a 7-day cycle built in there, and we have a 5-day cycle for more of the professional world. But the 7-day cycle, and again, there's tons of options built in there, but it kind of gives you a simple way to make sure you get your long toss in, so you're conditioning well and you're recovering well, so that you can just roll through the season. It's the relief pitchers, I think, that becomes a little trickier. And without going into gory detail, the bottom line is that relief pitchers need to be stretching their arm out as often as possible. Instead of thinking about saving their arm for the game, they need to know that, okay, maybe I can't pull down real heavy today because I may go in the game today, but I need to get my arm opened up to what it's used to. And if it's used to getting out to 300 feet, I got to kind of open it up to 300 feet or so, and maybe I won't pull down again and get super aggressive because I don't want my arm to experience the aggressive phase and then just go into shutdown mode. But I have one of my favorite things I've come up with for relief pitchers is what I call opening the door and without closing it. And so hand in hand with that for relief pitchers is incubating the arm. So just to hit on that very briefly is that relief pitchers through the season, to really optimally maintain their arm, is they need to open the door basically every day, unless maybe they threw 40 pitches the night before, they went maybe 20 pitches on Friday or 30 pitches on Friday, maybe they went 15 on Sunday. So maybe on Monday it'll be a little different, but the idea is that you open the door and you sort of stretch it out close to your capacity of a normal long toss, unless something unusual happened in the day or 2 or 3 before that. And the key is you just don't pull down. And what that does is it frees the arm up to its needs. It gets the range of motion in there. It's hot, so to speak. And by not pulling down, you can keep it hot by doing some light band work and some light, catch play. Believe it or not, for the next 3 or 4 hours, if you have a game at 7 p.m. and you long tossed at 5 p.m., you can actually keep your arm hot and incubated, so to speak, until 9:30 when you may go in for the 8th or 9th inning, just by doing some light band work and playing some light catch. So that's sort of a huge piece for the relievers. And again, the manual will go into more detail. But I guess to summarize your question, for starters, they'll have pretty much their start day. Usually day 3 and day 4 will be long toss days, and then their start day again. So they'll get 3 to 4 good long toss days in during the season to really maintenance their arm well. Relief pitchers just have to know that they need to stretch their arms out, and if they go 3 or 4 days without getting in a game, they need to know that they have to go out to their furthest throw, and they have to get some pull down days in. And obviously, it'd be better to do it on a non-game day. But just touching on the pitchers and the starting pitchers and relief pitchers, that gives you a good overview. And position players, if you're killing it all fall and you're really become a long toss animal and you're a throwing animal, you pretty much need to stretch it out every day and pull down for the most part every day, because that's just what your arm needs. And you don't have recovery period issues of being on the mound and throwing breaking balls that pitchers do. So your arm is probably going to be hungry every day. So we haven't got a feed it reference yet, but your arm is going to probably be hungry. It's going to actually demand. I mean, listen to this word. If you're in great shape, your arm is going to almost demand instinctively to stretch out about as far as you can and pull down, that's the only thing I can understand through a long season. You're going to pretty much stretch it out every day as a position player. Maybe some days your pull downs aren't quite as aggressive, but I can tell you my partner who played, I think, 13 or 14 years professionally as an outfielder, I think he basically went as far as he could and pulled down aggressively every single day because A, his arm loved it, and B, he wanted to know in the first inning if there's a runner on second, he's got to throw somebody out the plate. He's prepared.
Right. Direct application.
Yeah, so I can tell you this is for a fact. I'm almost 100% positive that I know he long tossed basically. He'll tell you he long tossed every day, but I'm almost positive that he pulled down. And I know because he was my long toss partner in college. I was a pitcher, he was an outfielder, and we both felt the need to pull down because that's just what our arm was conditioned to do. But I always say pitchers, listen to your arm, and maybe every day is not going to be a pull down day, of course, but position players, you don't have recovery period to be concerned about from pitching on a mound. And if your arm is feeling great, it wants to throw is the bottom line.
I'm going to put this on a tee for you. You ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
So as you're talking through this, and of course, I'm right in line with you, but I'm thinking about the coach that's out there that maybe this is new. Maybe this is the first time he's heard Alan. He's heard you really go into great detail on your program and on the specifics around. And if I'm in those shoes, you come back to that you were referencing the arm as being a living, breathing organism. It's its own entity with its own brain, and the whole key as a player, and we have to give, again, our coaches have to give our players the freedom to find this, is we've got to find the pulse. We've got to find the pulse and the heartbeat of their arm. Now, I just laid it on a tee for you, man. Go on that as much as you want.
Well, listen, at the end of the day, everybody's different. I understand that, we have to be sensitive to the individual, which is another huge piece we'll get into later, I'm sure. But the bottom line is this. I just feel like if you talk to, I think, anybody, just about any walk of life that's in the quote-unquote training field, our bodies are amazing. They can do amazing things if they're pushed. And obviously you have to, systematically build a new threshold because you don't want to shock your body or shock your arm. But my experience has been, and again, the players we've trained over these 25 years and the schools that we know have really gotten after this kind of a mentality, the feedback has been very consistent, and the arm will just shock you at how much it can do. And again, you got to do it systematically. You got to build it slowly. But I use that idea of it being a living, breathing organism because living, breathing organisms, if you feed it and feed it and feed it, they grow and evolve and expand, and they get to areas that maybe we didn't even think is possible. I mean, I'm sure you've coached a player who you've given them a couple ideas and some insight, and before you know it, they're on a whole other plane that maybe you never thought they were capable of. And we've had that experience, countless times with players who, yeah, he has a good arm, but to think he's going to throw 93 one day or 95 or whatever. It could be a kid that you never thought was going to break 70. I've had coaches tell me, that players I've gotten on this program where they're great kids and they know how to pitch, but maybe they didn't break 73 in high school, and all of a sudden they're throwing 82, and to somebody that doesn't seem like really, really fast, but that kid has a chance to experience a whole different level now of success at high school, maybe gets a college scholarship because of it. And so I just think that maybe to summarize a great question, just to be straightforward, is it's a plant. This arm, I used a redwood tree in an article I used a long time ago. I just think redwood trees are known to go up to 360 feet or so, and I just think of the idea of get it out of a greenhouse, get it out of
Sure.
Don't put it somewhere where there's a ceiling, and maybe you won't throw 95 one day, but let's make sure we get it healthy and durable, and let's give it a chance to find out how much it can grow. And I think the idea of growing and evolution and feeding, all those words go together, and I think that's why I love the idea of looking at your arm as a living, breathing organism that is, and here's a key thing, I just tweeted this last night, it's ready and willing to go to work for us if we give it the time and energy and the investment.
Well, here's a real important question, and if I'm any coach that's out there that's really looking to kind of be mindful of some things, one thing you need to be mindful of, if you haven't recognized, and I know you have, is the real epidemic of showcases and travel ball and how those things have really almost taken on its own being and its own life, but you almost, as a player, you have to be there. That's where the coaches are. I have to be seen. I have to be recruited. And what's great about your manual, Alan, is you make reference to what you call navigating the summer, which could not be a more profound way of looking at it, because I don't know if players really have a navigational tool. I don't think they have a game plan on how they're going to go from games on the weekend, Thursday through Sunday. They've got a showcase on Tuesday, Wednesday. They're throwing bullpens, all those different things. So talk to us about how you help those guys balance showcases, travel ball, the workload from their high school season, and really navigate the summer.
Well, I love it, Jeremy, because as you know, I think that's one of the most important things that I discovered over the last 5 years or so that I knew needed to be in the manual. And I've had to learn. I had a player that I was really consulting with for a little over a year that his advisor wanted me to really stay with him throughout the year and come up with a plan. And the off season and the in season stuff for me is just old school, just matter of fact for me. But I had to learn from him, and because he had this showcase coming up, and this was a kid that was invited to all these showcases and everything else, and
right.
So I had to help him navigate the summer. I had to help him when the summer was done figure out the fall. Of course, a lot of it was just based on how I'd take care of an arm anyway. But the point that you're making is so important, because I had to go to school on this as well. And now, of course, it's just become so clear to me that this summer is a very, very tricky time. And I don't think very many players or coaches or parents or maybe even advisors really understand the depth of the vulnerability of these kids. I think the showcases themselves, I mean, they're just doing their thing to help showcase the kids, and obviously the whole, doing what they need to do to help give the kids exposure. I think it's really more about the players and the advisors and the parents, or if it's not it doesn't have to be a kid that necessarily is a high profile kid. It could be just a kid who's in high school and he's on a travel ball team, and you still have to understand that the summer creates all sorts of variables, and if you are not completely clear on how to negotiate and navigate the summer, it single-handedly could be the reason that causes an arm problem and an arm injury, simply because the fall is built in usually with the high schools and colleges. The break between the fall and the spring is built in with the high school and colleges, and the spring, of course, is covered. And so it's sort of the summer 3-month period where, as you said, kids are kind of on their own to figure this out. And if they don't have a plan and they don't have some insight into how to negotiate, or as we talk about, navigate the summer, to me that could be the single most vulnerable period of time for a player to put his arm in harm's way. And that's why that question is critical, and that's why the manual goes into gory detail. And so I just hope whoever's listening to this conversation can get the manual and really have it as a point of reference. And I guess because I don't want it to seem like you have to buy the manual to get something out of me, but I think the bottom line is that I think the single most important point I bring up in the manual is that if number one, if you're playing through the spring and your season ends in June, if you're let's say as a pitcher, I tell players just to keep the ball rolling. Just stay. If you're in shape, stay in shape. As long as there's a showcase or a travel ball thing going on that's in the next month, just stay in shape. Just keep another month going, because the way that we build arms, I have zero concern about them going another month or two or whatever it is. But if you're going to shut down at the end of the season, because that's the right thing to do, and go into a rest period, the bottom line is this: if you take 1 week off and then want to go to a showcase, for every week you take off, you have to have 2 weeks of arm conditioning and arm training according to our off-season build-up, and that doesn't include maybe another week of bullpens. So the way I've set it up to me is I feel it's pretty foolproof. So if you take a week off, you need 2 weeks to train, because if you only took a week off, you're still in decent shape, so it's only going to take you 2 weeks to quote-unquote recatch the wave, and that might include even a pen or two if you're only going to throw an inning. If you take 2 weeks off, I add a week. Well, now you need 3 weeks, and that is at least 2 weeks of just conditioning, and maybe another week of conditioning and a couple of pens to get you ready. And this, again, is all based on you only throwing maybe an inning or two. If you take 3 weeks off, guess what? Now you're at 4 weeks of training before you're allowed to go to any, even for one inning. You need 3 weeks off at any point. And this is all based on 3 weeks off right after your season ended, knowing you're in shape. And so now if you take 4 weeks off, well, now you're kind of back to our year-round manual program. Now you're kind of back to it's 5 weeks. Well, 5 weeks is sort of the minimum we have for your build-up period. So in a way, you can't mess it up, because no matter what time you take off, there's always going to be a built-in buffer so that you are rock solid as far from an arm prep point of view to go pitch into a showcase. Now, if let's say you took 2 weeks off, and so you used 3 weeks to train and pitch an inning on that following Sunday, well, if you have a showcase the following Sunday, well, now you just stay in your conditioning mode because you're there. And so, see, Jeremy, all of a sudden now, in a way, you can't go wrong as long as you follow that plan. And I guess if that was the bottom line answer we can at least give to the listeners, without them, necessarily having the manual in front of them, that's the best piece of advice I can give you, and that includes the fall. It doesn't matter. The reason the year-round manual to me I think is so valuable is it gives you these options, and it gives you different angles to cover, whether you're in the summer or this is happening in the fall. You are covered for the entire period that is sort of maybe being more on your own.
Hence, year-round throwing manual. Right?
It's year-round.
That's it. There's a great part, and as I kind of went through it with you, there's a great part in the back, the addendum section, and I know I'm going to get you fired up, and I hope I do for everyone's sake. But you talk about rehab, and you talk about standing your ground. And when you're really, I know we dove into this even last night, and you really start to understand the dynamics that are involved in a player that believing in a process and believing in his development and seeing the results and gains and what that means when he enters a college program or enters a Major League Baseball program. Jump all over that. Jump into rehab and standing your ground, those topics.
Yeah, well, the addendum section, I figured, I've covered the off season, I covered the in season, I covered the rest periods, I've covered, the summer, and I thought to myself, okay, what are some of these other questions I'm going to get? And two areas that to me are just, you talk about in your core, in your heart and soul. The rehab is something that I would have never known better except from experience. And what happens is that the standard rehabilitation programs that are out there, and I have an article written about the origin of these rehabilitation programs, and that's just a side note on our article page. But I did a lot of research, and basically, what I've learned is that the rehab program, which does a really good job post-surgery and post-rehab, as far as rehab and at the clinic itself, once you get on the field, they'll build you slowly like our program, which is great. The concern I have is that they'll usually cap you at about 120, which is a standard rehab program. Some are more liberal now. They might go up to 180. But then according to the rehab plan, they will start to, for pitchers at least, they'll start to integrate mound work. And even there, again, they do that slowly to integrate the feeling of being off the mound. But my concern is, and I'm really hoping to get this addressed through some people I've been speaking with that have a lot of yank as far as in the rehab world, is there's really a 3 to 4 week period, in my opinion, missed, that when you get to 120 or 180, especially if you're a high school or college player, and you're used to throwing the ball, let's say 250 to 350, you still have to continue to build your distance. And I actually want that extra month of buffer time anyway to condition the arm. And as I said earlier, I'm big on stacking the base. So once the base is built, which the rehab program for me does a good job of that, well, now you got to stack it. You're not ready to get on a mound, in other words, until you get to what I consider to be your furthest throw. And so for a rehab guy that threw at 300 feet before surgery, I'm not saying he's going to get to 300 feet for sure. Maybe it's 275. But sometimes after rehab, their arms are stronger, so maybe it's going to be 325. But whatever the number is, you have to have another window, and I consider it to be at least 4 weeks of the post-rehab throwing program, which ends at 120 to 180 or so. I want another month to build up the arm. Look, if this is going to be a 10-month cycle anyway, what's another month to just do hardcore conditioning, endurance building, and recovery period, benefits. So So again, that rehab piece to me is so huge, and I've gotten, believe me, I have gotten calls and emails and direct messages from people that are going through rehab, and they do the surgery, they do the rehab great, they do the rehab throwing great, but now they're starting to get on a mound. And by the way, any pitcher that gets on a mound, no matter what, even if he's told to throw at 50%, the message is that you're getting close to pitching. There tends to be adrenaline when you get on a mound, and it's hard. And it's hard to back players off at that point. So I just don't want them near a mound for another month. That's the best advice I can give anybody going through rehab is when you get done with the quote unquote rehab throwing program, whether it's 120 or 180, whatever it is, just know, unless you're 8 or 9 year old, which maybe then you're done, just know you probably have at least another month of just arm conditioning at your own pace, where you're building more volume, you're building more distance, you're building more endurance, and then you can slowly start to integrate the mound work the way that they maybe want you, the way they would suggest you integrate the mound work. So the rehab, to me, I have a whole article written about this. It is a massive, massive piece to this whole arm health world.
All right, that's awesome. Now, standing your ground, because I know this is hit home for you in a lot of regards, but I think it's important. I think people need to know the dynamics that are involved around this, and again, just kind of trusting the player's process. Go into that a little bit.
Well, for me, I mean, this may be, other than the manual itself, the year-round part of it, this may be the single most important thing, and it probably is. It's the single most important piece of advice I can give to a player, a parent, a coach, an advisor, anybody, a sister, an aunt, about really the arm growing as a person, as a player. And that is, standing your ground simply means whatever program you came up with, whether it's you've learned about long toss, or you've done Ron Wolforth's program, or Kyle Bodie, or you spent time with Eric Cressy, or this nutritionist, or this core program, whatever you have done to get to where you've got to, that has allowed you to really excel, and you know it because you know your body better than anybody you'll ever meet the rest of your life.
Right.
Whatever you did to be that kid that got the college scholarship, or was drafted in the third round, or whatever it was, or just got you to a point where you were excelling, then I'm not saying don't listen to what other people have to offer, because I think it's great to have an open mind. But if you are clear about what has made you extremely successful, and by the way, extremely healthy, wherever you go, your arm goes with you. So if you meet somebody new, it's not to say don't listen to what they may suggest to help you get better. But standing your ground means to not deviate and to not compromise with someone that doesn't know your arm and doesn't know your throwing program. And let's just talk right now about throwing program, because that's obviously the topic, and arm care stuff, band work. Whatever things you have done to address your arm to where you feel like your arm has got to become a beast, and it is electric, and it is happy, and it has great recovery period, and it wants to throw all the time. You have to stand your ground, meaning whether it's a college program or professional baseball. You have to educate them. You have to let them know where you're at, because if you compromise because you don't want to get in trouble, or you don't want to ruffle someone's feathers, and you break down because of it, that's a sad day. It's a bad day, because you will always know your arm and how your arm was prepared better than anybody you meet. And if someone offers you something that helps you prepare better and it feels good, do it. If someone says, hey, let's try this and it feels good, do it. But I've had many, many cases of players that we won't go into detail, but it has absolutely crushed me that I felt like, especially the kids in our pro camp where I had them for 8 weeks, and I knew exactly who they were when they left me. And for them to go into professional baseball and have an organization, and this could be the same with college, it doesn't matter, but to go somewhere, and I'm not saying every organization does this, because right now, luckily, only a small percentage of them do compared to 10 years ago. But at the end of the day, if you don't stand your ground and do what you know you need to do to maintain the health and strength of your arm, then you're asking yourself for trouble, because no one's going to ever know your arm as well as you. And that's the bottom line message is wherever you go and whatever you've done to get to where you've got to, don't deviate. Don't let someone the word that really bugs me is impose. Don't have someone impose a structured program that is like a cookie-cutter program that's a one-size-fits-all because they think that's the best program for you, and they don't know the first thing about you. The average coach and the average professional organization or college coaches, high school coaches, they need to adapt to you for the most part unless you have no clue what you're doing.
I love it. I think the key for, if I'm a listener, but if you're on social media, you got to follow Alan at Jaeger Sports, Jaeger Sports, and you've got to listen to his messages, the tweets, the articles, all the information that comes out is just quality beyond quality information. And Alan, if we could wrap up, because I knew we'd hit our time, I didn't have any reservations about that. But if you had to surmise this entire conversation, man, especially about staying healthy and arm health and all those things, what are kind of your final thoughts? What are kind of your closing remarks on this?
Yeah, well, first of all, man, it's just been such an honor and a treat to do this, and I so appreciate your level of interest, man, and ABCA. Again, they're an inspiring place right now. I know that you guys are just you're really committed to education and you're really committed to making a difference. So I just appreciate this. And one quick thing, I just want to just address one thing I said about that you don't have a clue. That sounded a bit harsh. I just mean if the kid is uneducated and if the player's uneducated, or the coach is but you know what I meant. I just meant they didn't have a clue. I just meant they weren't educated. Wrapping it up, man, I think it's pretty simple. I think number one, the arm is this living, breathing organism that is ready and willing to do magical things if we just invest into it and feed it, as I like to say. Number two, always know that at the end of the day, there's really no such thing as a throwing program as much as it's about listening to your arm. And the irony is the better you listen to your arm, the more you're going to probably find out it wants to do. And number three is just know that at the end of the day, once you have devised your plan or once you've gone to school and got to a position where your arm is thriving and you just love what your arm is about and you've done your homework and you've done the training, wherever you go, your arm goes with you. And make sure that you always adhere to your arm's needs first rather than be put in a position where someone's going to impose something on you that not only doesn't agree with what you've done, but it may be the polar opposite of what you believe you should be doing. And that's why that stand your ground. I'm glad that was the last question in a way, because other than building up your arm the right way and taking care of it, I think the next most important thing about what we teach is you have to once you get it and once you become an animal, you got to protect it. And the way to protect it is you've got to stand your ground and not let somebody else tell you what to do with your arm and your career when you know best.
Great stuff. Awesome stuff. Well, Alan, we sincerely, on behalf of the ABCA, appreciate you being our inaugural guest on Calls from the Clubhouse. This has been an awesome show, man. We really appreciate your information and all you're doing for the game and obviously being a loyal ABCA member. Thanks for being on, man. We appreciate your time all the way from Santa Monica.
Well, once again, thank you for having me, Jeremy, and just really appreciate what you guys are doing. And it's just such an honor to be doing this. And what can I say except thanks, man.
Absolutely. Well, have a great day, and we look forward to hearing from you soon.
All right. Thanks again, Jeremy.
Wow. What a great interview with Alan. And as you can tell, he's very passionate about his players and their health and their development and helping each player reach their full potential. We're excited to have that, but that's only part of it. Now the back half of this game, the back half of the podcast, we're going to introduce three of the best college baseball coaches in the country. Again, Nate Yeske from Oregon State, Scott Brown from Vanderbilt University, and Butch Thompson from Auburn University, along with Alan Jaeger as we continue these topics. Stay tuned.
All right, everybody, we'll welcome you back to the second half, again, of our inaugural ABCA's Calls from the Clubhouse podcast, and we're excited to be with some of the greatest baseball minds that are in today's game, guys that I look up to as a young coach, but guys that really have a lot to offer. More importantly, they're passionate ABCA members, which is obviously great for us here in the national office. But I want you to meet these guys. I want you to hear from them, and here's some of them right here. We've got head coach at Auburn University, Butch Thompson. Butch, thanks for being on the call.
Thank you, Sheets. Appreciate the support of the ABCA and to be part of this with Alan and these other great coaches.
We've also got assistant coach all the way out in Corvallis, Oregon, Oregon State University, Nate Yeske. Nate, thanks for being on the call with us today.
Thanks for having me. Looking forward to getting to talk more about the game and your guys' influence on it.
And last but certainly not least, we've got the associate head coach at Vanderbilt University, Scotty Brown. Scott, thanks for being on the phone, man.
Appreciate it, Sheets. It's an honor to be obviously friends with all these guys, to meet Nate for the first time, and really look forward to talking about some great things today.
That's great. Now, we've got a guest listener, as you three know, but I want to make sure the listeners know. If you start hearing, a girlish giggle in the background, and I'm sure he's going to chime in at some point, but we've continued from our first segment. Alan Jaeger still on the phone. Alan, thanks for hanging out with us some more.
Hey, thanks again, and I just cannot wait to hear what the boys have to say.
Awesome stuff. Well, let's get right into it because our coaches are starving for information. So I think, kind of curtailing what we talked about with Alan, let's talk about your impressions of the year-round throwing manual. We all, see the information that's in there and how invaluable that stuff is. But kind of what are your impressions from it, but also how have you taken Alan's plan of band work and long toss and, really the freedom inside the arm and really taking it to your programs and your staffs? And I'm going to set the floor for Brownie if you want to take us off on question number one.
Well, first and foremost, I think the best thing about the manual is that it provides written guidelines that people could get a start. Coaches around the country and in this game can use as a starting point because, the importance to me is that any manual is a good starting point. It kind of can develop some awareness through the guidelines, so to speak. And the beautiful word that you mentioned right there to me is freedom. And that's the beauty and the essence of the manual and just the way that Alan does things with his bands and his throwing program. And for me, that's kind of the foundational piece to the way I coach our pitchers here and have coached pitchers in my career is just that freedom-based deal where, we're setting up some guidelines at the start, and then we want it to evolve into what works for you as an individual. So it does a great job in just kind of giving a good starting point for pitchers all over.
That's great. Let's shift it out to Corvallis. Nate, your opinions, your impressions, and obviously your implementation with your staff.
Well, I think that the manual is certainly something that provides a good foundation for a player or a coach. And, to echo Brownie's sentiments, the freedom that's involved with it and the opportunity for a lot of guys to kind of put their own stamp on it is pretty good. And I think that there are things that are going to speak more to certain individuals at certain points, be it in their training or in their prep work for games. But ultimately, I think that it gives the guys a lot of flexibility to really kind of build it into their own program. And ultimately, I think that it's good because it opens a two-way street between player and coach. And a lot of times, I think players are seeking out information just like we are as coaches, but I think sometimes they forget that they've been able to get themselves to where they are in their career, trusting their instincts. And I think that this helps develop those instincts a little bit more with just how you prepare for a game and then ultimately how you get into the recovery phase of things, which is essentially preparing for the next time out.
Coach Thompson?
Well, I'll just, both these guys make great points. I guess, to repeat kind of what they're saying, template's the word I use, and I saw it in the J-bands 5 years ago when I first started doing it, because there's been bands around for a long period of time, but to have the 10 exercises right in front of you, that captures and does something for you, as simple as it may sound. And then just getting started with guys, a group of guys 5 years ago where it's a total sellout to really buying into the band work, because I think we've all coached long enough and been around that you have tried everything to try to develop a pitching staff. I've been through a cone phase of long toss. I've been through timing distances, limiting distances, to just trying to figure out, the best way to do this thing. And the first time that I captured and thought about long toss and with Alan, and you hear the word organic and freedom that you hear come up and everything you're talking about, but it really allows you to learn how to run your own show. And I know these two coaches hopefully would agree, but have at least experienced, you really become really good at what you do when you teach somebody how to ultimately run their own show. And this is an unbelievable template that I will allow me to allow a pitcher to digest, to understand the freedom and being able to go and listen to your arm, because once you take complete ownership for your arm, then you can make decisions. You can play for anybody. You can go from team to team and have a plan and not be reliant on someone else or something else. And it just gives a great point of reference for you to go back to, for you to challenge, and that's why I've always, appreciated Alan, the ABCA, everything that we're trying to do with this deal, because it helps you continue to grow as a coach, as a person, as a teacher, especially when you have a manual like this that just keeps posing other questions. All right, this is a great template for me to lay out. How does it work specifically for me? And it gives a guide for someone that's just trying to start out. Before he gets to that level 2 of really trying to go on his own experience, it gives him a great starting point, a safe starting point, and a very wide open kind of deal to define all of this. And I've been excited to get this and excited to share it. And it really helps give a starting point for someone to start their journey.
Absolutely, and I think you brought up a great point, and I think everyone on the call, Alan included and myself included, you've got to be a lifelong learner. You have to continue to challenge what you're doing and challenge what you know to really, find almost peace or find a better place to teach from. And that leads me right into this question. I'm going to change the order up just a little bit. And Nate, I'm going to pose this to you first. What was kind of the turning point for you in your development as a pitching coach? You obviously have your professional experience and coming out, but more importantly, like getting into your young years at UNLV, then obviously what you've done at Oregon State. What was the turning point? Like, when did long toss really become a priority, or band work, or some of the things that Alan talks about? When did that hit you, and how's it gone since?
Probably, I couldn't really nail it down to a specific day or even a season, but I know that it really comes into play when you start looking at some of the players that you experience. And the more that you listen to those players and the feedback that they provide for you, they start maybe hitting on some hot topics that instinctually maybe apply to you as a player, or things that have kind of surfaced in other conversations with other coaches. So, one thing we kind of chuckled about over the years was, gosh, the guys who really like to throw have good arms. And, well, is it the chicken or the egg theory, in the sense of they must have a good arm because they like to throw a lot. And you start looking at some of the tools that are available, like Alan's bands and the format that they provide for guys to really kind of hone their craft. And the more that these tools kept popping up, the more that it just made sense to kind of transition in that direction and give kids some more feedback. It's funny now, even seeing with our guys to this day, I believe it was in our last game, I think you're limited to just a handful of pitches between innings. So some of our kids, they'll actually get up and do some of the activities between innings, getting themselves ready to roll again. So you see those things, and you start getting some feedback from some of the kids and what they like. And I just think that you allow them to take ownership of it, and that will take it in the direction that maybe you need to go as a coach, because each year, while you might have a certain format that's set in place, the kids are different. And you got to find out what works for each one of them.
And Brownie, obviously for you, man, coming up with some, Division III roots and doing a great job at Cortland State, and your great run with Eddie at St. John's, man, and then it goes without saying what you guys have done at Vanderbilt the last 4 years. But same thing for you, man. When did this long toss program or the band work, or when did that stuff really hit you? And obviously, how's it run for you since in your career?
Well, kind of like Nate said, it's tough to really put an actual time frame on it. I think, when I look back at it, you read things, you pick up things, you think about the things that you've done in your career, because those are your experiences that you've had success with, and you just try to format it to where you can put it in place for your pitching staff. And for me, I think at an early age as a young coach, the one thing that I was fortunate enough was to be around some great coaches my whole life and all that stuff. And I know it sounds cliché, but they gave me the opportunity to kind of learn on my own and through experiences. And actually, one of my favorite coaches of all time was I'm not going to mention him by name, but he actually butted heads with me all the time because he was a very cookie cutter type pitching coach, cloned up some guys and stuff, and it really stayed with me. And I took a positive experience out of that because I think what I did is I said, this doesn't work for everybody. But I think it was back in the early 2000s when Alan came out with that article about, some guidelines, almost like this year-round manual he just put out through his long toss. And I just, like I do now, if there's something I find and I research that I like, whether it be bands, whether it be weighted balls, whether it be bullpen work, whatever it may be, I try to bring it to the table to the players. And, I ask them, I say, hey, check this out, try this out, let's go through this. And maybe at first it's, everybody's going to do it. And then what I like to see is, how do they implement it into their routines? Do they like it? The feedback, if pitchers have an awareness to what they're doing, then they're going to give you the feedback that you need, whether it's good or bad. And some of the guys we have that you've coached, they don't ever develop that awareness because they're always told what to do and when to do it. And, they almost become robotic, and it's just an unfortunate thing. And really, dating back to the Little League days of playing, it should be a playground. It really should. You should be able to cross the white lines and know that, hey, we're out here to play. And the last time I checked, when you run around the playground, there's not too many rules and regulations as to what you got to follow. It's, you're just running up and down the slides and doing what you want to do. So, that's the big thing as far as, implementing this. I've seen guys, that I've been fortunate to coach some guys that throw 300 plus all the time, 6 days a week, and have had great success. I've had other guys that, stay in that comfort zone of 250 and throw a lot. So I don't think there's an exact variable to it, but the one thing that I'm certain of is that the guys that throw more regularly are more healthy, and they just seem to have good arms. And it's one of those deals that, I think just taking a look at things, from the evolution of the Little League player all the way up to the quality professionals, that's a common ingredient. I really believe that. So I can really say maybe dating back to, I'm not sure the exact date. I remember reading it in, collegiate baseball newspaper, Alan's article there on his long toss. I wasn't sure how to pronounce his last name. If it was, 15 different names I tried to pronounce it by, but it might have been a rerun, or I'm not sure. But I do remember bringing that back and saying, listen, I think this is a good starting point, and kind of implemented it at St. John's. It was probably the first time that really came into play, and I think about 2004 would be the first year or so, and it's just been evolving ever since in that regards.
That's great. Butch, I want you to weigh in on this too, because you kind of alluded to, that 5 years ago, kind of that epiphany moment. Jump in on this.
Yeah, I love the playground reference because I think it gets back to that. So I think Scott's dead on with that. I feel like if I would have to say it's when I played, when I actually threw. I've always believed as a player that long toss gave me arm shape, whether it gave me more velocity, whether it increased pitch count, whether it helped me locate, whether it gave me confidence. I always thought long toss was a huge piece, and arguably probably was my biggest piece. And I think that would be different for every pitcher too, but it was such a huge piece. And just kind of go through the whole method of what I mentioned first off of, throwing the cones, throwing the times. When I first got a chance to visit with Alan, it just simplified everything to me, and it made sense, and it allowed Brownie just used the word awareness to take charge. Whenever you can get a player to allow his awareness to fill in all the gaps, I think you got a better player, and I agree with that 100%. And I think everything I've been searching for was summed up in the deal with Alan. The other key point I'll make here, not repeat everything that these other two great guys are saying, is this manual may be just coming out, but I don't think this was yesterday for Alan. After we played, Nate, after we played in 13, I went out pretty quick right after that series and met with Alan. And I wanted to get past a book or past a conversation over the phone and meet in person, and that was a huge experience for me and gave me a lot of conviction. Because a lot of times we think we reinvent the wheel, and I really think, Alan, you can jump in here, but I think this is probably 25 years in the making and didn't come up last night. This manual is just not churned out. This has been through probably a quarter century of you pursuing this and thinking about it and working with high-level guys. And I believe in all that, and I just, in the last 5 years, I just had another one reach the big leagues, 4 guys here in the last 5 years, and I can just tell, but I give those 4 guys all the credit. That's not a brag statement. That's guys leaving me. I've not been with them for the last 2 or 3 years. That's guys making their own way, and I think as a coach, that's what we're trying to get to. Can we get them to something like this? Can we transfer this mindset of this long toss into everything that we do? I think we build a stronger player, one that eventually doesn't need anybody, one that can tap into all of his awareness, create his convictions and ownerships for himself. But long toss, I believe us all being on this call believes that it's a building block, and the mindset of this long toss, it's not just do this for 3 minutes. It's the whole experience of the deal, both mental and physical. Alan just tied it together so good for me that's made it so exciting.
Yeah, I was just going to say that, to Butch's point, it is ironically 25 years, technically 26 years, but who's counting? But, it's been the accumulation of a lot of things. But one of the references I want to make is to our previous conversation we just had. And I was a long toss guy myself. As I've probably told all these guys, I didn't know what a throwing program was. I just listened to my arm, and I had a pretty strong arm for my size, and I just loved throwing. And I loved throwing far, and I loved throwing hard. And, again, it was very intuitive and very instinctive. And so that's just how I train guys. I kind of train guys based on how I felt. And if the feedback, I guess, wasn't overwhelmingly consistent from the players I trained starting at the junior college, level for 3 years. But something I referenced in our last talk is that what really helped me along the path was not just the players that I worked with, but, when I had conversations with people I respect so much, like, Butch and Nate and Brownie, it's those people along my path that not necessarily they were integrating my program or the way I taught long toss exactly, but just the feedback in general over the years. It's just so overwhelming, and I think it was Brownie earlier made a point about, it's not ironic that or Nate said something about the chicken and the egg. I mean, it's just not ironic that the guys that seem to have the best arms, they love to throw, they usually love to throw far, and they usually like to throw a lot. And it's not, to me, it's not a coincidence. It's just a reality. So I guess the tie-in I wanted to make more than anything is that, one of the things I think that's given me so much confidence and so much gratification is that when I hear people that I consider, some of the best minds in the game have integrated this kind of a philosophy, and the feedback's been so consistent. And so anyway, that was my quick input. So back to you guys.
I knew it wouldn't take long for you to jump on the call. I just knew. I was counting down the seconds. No, that's great stuff. And I'm going to stay kind of on that point, Butch. I'm going to let you kick this off because, whether it was you in your first few years, at Huntington or at Birmingham Southern, as you're kind of coming up, what would you, now sitting in the chair you sit in, what would you offer that 23-year-old budding college pitching coach? What would you offer? What were some of the ideals that maybe you've moved away from, and kind of course your development as a pitching coach and as a person through that?
Well, it's just hard as you're young because you want to be so, so you're so energetic. You're going to make such a difference. And the word clone came up earlier on, and I think what you do when you're young is you teach what you're taught. You need that though. It's really hard to change the course because when you first start coaching, you're teaching what's been told to you, and what's neat after about 10 or 15 years, you teach what the game's taught you, and you come up with your own deal. And once you get to that transition, it's pretty neat as you start thinking outside the box. And all right, I've done all of this for a few years now. What really works? What have you learned from your players, basically? So earnestly, I think you just jump in. You work as hard as you can. You kind of support. Nate said it earlier, is finding how each person works, how each pitcher works. Allow a pitcher to have his own identity instead of one broad identity across the board. It's an individual identity. It's an individual setup, individual packages for each guy to approach them that way. I think you can carry that from a long toss standpoint of somebody that's throwing 100 yards, somebody that's staying at 250, 250 feet. I think that just translates into everything. When you throw this pitch, what's best versus a righty, what's best versus a lefty, as opposed to the old way I was long tossing with the British redcoats. Everybody's in a straight line, and then you see what happened to them, how they got plucked off, and you go to watch a very high level of baseball, and you go to a major league game and you see all the different distances when they're out there throwing. You see a pitching staff, and you see some guys at flat ground at 60 feet. You see another group at 120. You see two guys really airing it out that may be in the ball game, or they're just opening their arm or closing with some intensity. They're all on different days. They were all used different. They're all getting ready for something else, and somehow in that mass confusion, everybody's doing exactly what they need to do to be preparing for what they are doing. And I think when I was really young, I wish I could have just not tried to make everybody the same. I had an imprint of what pitching was supposed to be, and I just think it naturally took time to start listening to my guys, start getting some experiences, to start getting to a point of understanding individual identity. And identity is a huge word, and I'll leave it with this: it's once you get an identity of the pitcher and everything, the identity of a man, you really got to know who you are before you know what to go do. And I think that's important. I still got some buddies that are my age in their middle 40s that still don't know who they are, and they're still wandering around. And as early in life as a man can find out who they are, they have a chance to really make a difference and make great strides and go somewhere. So I think identity of a person, identity of a pitcher, and then I think you can go master some skills.
And Nate, I want you to jump on this. Obviously you were trying to find yourself coming out of pro ball, and so 26, 27, 28 years old, and now you're a college pitching coach. What would you, sitting where you're at right now in 2016, what would you say to that young Nate Yeske about pitching development?
Well, I'd probably tie it in first thinking about something that my mom had shared with me when I was younger, and she said, you've got one mouth and two ears for a reason. So take advantage of the numbers and make sure you continue to listen. And as I've gotten older, I realize that the eyes get brought into that equation as well. So it's kind of a 4-on-1 when you think about it, in the sense of what you're looking at, what you're listening to, and the strength in those numbers really helps you, I think, identify more with what's going on with the game itself. The game was here before we got here. The game will be here after we leave. And I think with today's day and age of social media and just the readily available amount of information and how easy it is to access, it's certainly made it maybe easier, yet at the same time more difficult for a lot of coaches because there's more information. And I think some kids struggle to find their own identity, as Butch mentioned, and some of those things can be challenging, but ultimately the more that you listen to your players and the more that you see the things that work for them, and I would say probably, at least for myself, within the last year and a half, really delving into more things that really caught my attention. And, now I've got a Japanese pitching book. I've got a Japanese hitting book. Fortunately enough, there's a gal here on campus that helps me translate some of those things, and she's been wonderful. But, a lot of those things are just, they resonate different with different people, and you don't know what's going to necessarily flip that switch for them or motivate them to look at things differently. But, different strokes for different folks. It really started to, I think, hit home with me watching the World Baseball Classic, and I call it the Cuban school of baseball, because the Cuban national team seemingly had 3 relievers up and throwing every game from the second inning on, and they would play the next day, and you'd see those same 3 relievers be up throwing from the second inning on. And it made you start to think differently about how guys prepare and how they go about their business. So, talking to coaches, and I think it's very important when you're young. They're going to have a lot of great information for you, but I think you're going to have to really kind of whittle it down to the things that you feel like you can really control. And not that you're a salesman, but honestly, if your players don't believe that you know what you're talking about or what you're bringing to the table, it's going to be hard for them to really, I would think, absorb and digest that information and put it into play for themselves. So, figure out the 3, 4, 5 things that you're pretty good at, the basics and the fundamentals, because I share this with my players almost daily, that you can watch any sport, and I don't care if it's basketball, golf, you name it. When somebody has struggled and they come back to that individual and they interview them and they say, you're having some success again, coming off of your struggles, what have you done to get yourself back in the swing of things, however they choose to word it, you'll see that it's generally the same response. And they'll often say, well, I got back to the basics, or I got back to the fundamentals. And I shake my head and I laugh, thinking, what did you ever do to get away from them in the first place? There wasn't anything that you really needed to get going. And I shared this analogy with a young man not too long ago. I says, the wheels work for a long time. You don't have to try to make it a different shape. Just hook it up and get that thing rolling. Because he often wants to really expand upon what he's brought to the table. So different challenges for everybody when they get into coaching. Mine was probably just taking off the players' cleats. You live and die on every pitch so much, and by the end of the weekend, you're more exhausted than when you played because you're locked into every pitch. But through that phase, I think the learning when you're playing against other teams, certainly I know I keep an eye on Scott and Butch and what they do with their guys, and because I think success leaves clues. And when you start seeing more guys have more success, I think that's where people tend to gravitate to, where they see those guys probably year after year when they're turning out the quality of arms that they do.
Well, if you go back to the basics, we're going to go back to the playground. Brownie, I'm going to pose the same question to you, and your dynamic is a little bit different. You just got done playing, and now you're going to turn around and coach at the place you played at. And again, sitting in Nashville, what would you look back and tell that young Scotty Brown?
Well, first of all, I don't know if you can say it much better than Butch and Nate just did. Just some unbelievable analogies there, identities, and just going back to the basics and open ears and all that good stuff. All the stuff probably mom and dad have told you your whole life, but you just, it's your mom and dad. You don't listen to them until, you're a little bit older. So as a young coach, I think, the biggest thing is to have those open ears. And I think Coach Blankmeyer said this to me, even as I was walking out the doors of St. John's. He looked me in the eyes, and I'll never forget it. And he said, "Don't change a thing, Brownie. Just be you. Just coach to your personality. All right? Don't think you need to go anywhere else or do anything different. You just coach to your personality. You continue to learn. You'll be fine, and you'll do well." And I never forgot that. It just kind of resonated with me because, you hear the outside things of, replacing a great coach like Derek Johnson here at a tremendous program, and you think you got to come in maybe and follow up those footsteps, but you don't. You just have to coach your pitchers the way that you want to coach them. And I think, as a young coach, I learned one of the most important things outside of just pitching development and stuff is the relationship you have with each individual. Just to kind of get off on a different note than Nate and Butch, but it's just if you can really get into the inner belief system of each pitcher, Butch said it before. There's no greater feeling than sitting back and watching that guy drive his own bus. It really, and all the great ones that we've coached, I think that's a common ingredient to each of them is, we never threw one pitch for them. We never lifted one weight, ran one sprint, threw one long toss ball for these guys. What we probably did is provide them some structure within and help motivate them on days maybe as a young individual where it might have lacked, but ultimately it becomes an intrinsic motivation for each and every guy. And when they get to that point where they know what they need to do and how they're going to drive their own bus, I said before, it's special. It almost brings pure enjoyment watching it because you know that guy right now has the ingredients to be successful, not only on the baseball field as he moves forward, but eventually in life, whatever happens. So, to get back to the young coach, it's just open ears, be yourself, continue to learn. And I think another thing that's important as a young coach, and you hear the expression, put your dues in. I don't think it's anything to do with that. I think it's just coach where you are right now. Don't think you need to have this plan of where you want to be in 5 years, 10 years. Yeah, you can have goals, but a lot of coaches in our profession sometimes get caught up in like, where am I going to be next? What am I going to do next? Well, what about today? What about the guys you have right in front of you right now that you're trying to make an impact on? And when you do that, you kind of, it leads you to good things. It really does. You get more enjoyment out of it, and it's just day to day, which is one of the things we always preach to our players. So, those are the things that I would, I've learned along the way, and I wish I would have known a little more at a younger age. So I'm like Nate, though. I still have a hard time taking off my shoes, my cleats right now, because I still think I can pitch, and that's a challenge as well. If you see us take batting practice, I don't really partake in BP too much as far as hitting fungos and stuff because I'm usually in like right center field or left center field, long tossing to the bucket, and I just joke around with the guys, telling them that I have the most accurate arm in the stadium right now. Still, might not be coming out firm with some velocity, but it's going to be landed. So,
right.
Just to get on that.
Hey, Jeremy, can I add one quick thing?
Yeah, go ahead.
I hate to interrupt the three genius answers that they were. It's just amazing. I got stillness from Butch, but it's just nice to keep getting better at these conversations. The one thing I would share, just maybe I'm more of that independent coach, not so much in the organization, if you will, but and the coaches, I'm sure will all agree with this. I'm so impressed when someone goes out of their way to reach out to me. It could be a high school kid in Idaho, sends me an email, and I just think for a young coach, one of the single most important things they can do is sort of like what Nate was saying, the 4-to-1, is to, especially like ABCA shows or any conventions, is approach coaches. I've talked to coaches about I asked them how many coaches have called you throughout the year to come out and observe a practice. And to me, the coaches that call coaches and say, hey, I want to go out and observe a practice, or hey, can you make 20 minutes for me if I come by the office? Coaches, by just instinctiveness, because we've all been there, we love sharing and we love helping out. And when someone comes to us like a student and says, hey, can I pick your brain or can I learn a little bit? We love that as coaches. And you know what else? We appreciate it, and we appreciate their desire to get better. So I think that one of the best things a young coach can do, and I'm sure all three of the guys are going to agree with me, is just make the effort, reach out, go up to somebody that at a show that even if you think they're busy or they don't have time for you, walk up and introduce yourself, and it's just amazing how far that can go.
You could cut the audio right here and sell it and make audio gold. Guys, that was a phenomenal response, and that was more of a personal question, but I just know there's coaches out there that need to sometimes step back and challenge what they're doing. It's the old one of the dreaded words, and I got this from Coach Scalinas in his highlight video. We've always done it that way, and I think some coaches operate by that mantra, and it's always great to hear four great baseball minds reference that. Let's get back to obviously the Alan and his teachings and the manual, because I think there's still so much I want to expand upon. But taking the program, and Brownie, I'm going to come right back to you, but taking the program and implementing it into your players, like how have they responded to the freedom, even from a health standpoint, but maybe just even a mental standpoint? How have they responded to that with all your kids at Vanderbilt?
Well, I think first and foremost, they know it's theirs. I
Sure.
remember a manager asking me, my first day here, he said, Coach, how many cones do you want set up in the outfield? And I said, I was just kind of shocked. I said, cones? I don't know what you're asking me. And he said, well, normally we lay out some cones. And I said, well, okay. I said, I don't need any cones. I said, I like distances, but and I like to have parameters like that where, a guy knows he's at 60 feet. But my biggest thing was, when I say we're going to do something at 60 feet, I think you should have an idea where 60 feet is. So
right.
I think that's one of the things that the players have really liked. And I think it goes back to even at St. John's. It's just the fact that they have ownership of what they're going to do. It's from anything from an activation to a throwing program is, we use the fall to kind of teach, try new things, tinker, play around with it a little bit. And I kind of use the analogy, it's like there's going to be a smorgasbord of plates introduced to you here in the fall. And even you returners, you're going to get some new stuff because there's always new stuff coming out there, and you're going to try some new things. And what I really want you to do by Thanksgiving is eat dinner and have a good idea what you want off that table to really help you move forward, leading into the season. Not that it's going to change, but write it down, have a good plan of how you want to operate on a daily basis. And that's really the only way you're going to identify, hey, how you feel that day. And listening to your arm, as Alan talks about, is if you give them that freedom. If guys are forced to do things all the time, then it doesn't really become theirs. It's like, whoa, I got to do this again. And then you got to say to yourself as a coach, are they doing it because they believe it works, or are they doing it because I'm telling them to do it? And that's not a good feeling, I don't think, as a coach, that somebody's just kind of doing something as eyewash because they're told to do it. We don't do that type of work, the busy work where it's just to build time, to fill time. I don't ever want pitchers to feel like that, or even athletes in general. You want everything done with intent and purpose. And I think that's the thing that, the guys that I've coached, that's the common ingredient that we talk about all the time.
Nate, what about the Beaver bullpen, man? How are your players responded to that freedom?
I think they've really enjoyed it. I think kids have found ways to do some things. Each kid is going to probably just use a couple different reps, because initially when we introduced the program to them, they thought, well, okay, there's 10 here, there's 12, there's 15, and with the elements at times, within our own conference even, you can go somewhere where it's very warm one day, you can go somewhere where it's a little bit chillier, and kids are finding out that, shoot, maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less, based on how they feel that day, and I think that really puts them in tune with themselves. Pitching is such a feel-based, dynamic movement that when you can take and put an added element of feel into the preparation, and then again into the recovery, because I think that they're hand in hand. Recovery is really just preparing for the next time that you're going to pick up the ball. It's been good for a lot of those kids, and I think it gives them something that they can carry on that's not going to necessarily be intrusive with anything that they might do should they have the opportunity to play professionally. I think that the format fits well within the dynamic, whether it be playing for a team out of the AL East or the NL West. Those things that they do certainly give them something that they can carry on, because we share with kids all the time our information, and we hope that they hang on to it. And to try to offer perspective to them, we remind some of them from time to time that if you play this game long enough, you're going to have a lot of different instructors. And you're going to need to take bits and pieces from each one of those guys, and how do you make those things work? And our goal as coaches, as crazy as it sounds, is to make ourselves less and less necessary, because ultimately you have to be your own best coach. And I think that it's funny. Brownie touched on it earlier with the playground analogy. My daughter's 4. She's taken an interest in golf for whatever reason, and when we hit the ball around the yard, we say, go that way, and she'll turn herself around, and she has an idea of what she needs to do. And I think sometimes as adults we mess it up. And so, to tie it in full circle back to the bands, when we give those kids something to do, it's funny to see some of them kind of integrate the band program into what they do from a philosophical standpoint. And we've even got some kids that have kind of created some new movements that they feel like helps prepare them. And that's good. Anytime you can have that type of tool to be a resource that they can readily have available to go back to at any given time, be it like I said before, in the dugout between innings or prepare for yourself before a game, it's great. And I know that when they leave, a lot of kids always ask that go on and play professionally, hey, Coach, you got a couple more bands laying around. I want to buy a couple just so that I have them. And our kids now, they don't even pack them. They put them in their carry-on to make sure that they have them in case their luggage gets lost when we're traveling on the road.
Alan's smile, you could frame his smile right now after that statement right there.
You can.
Coach Thompson, weigh in on that, man. I definitely interested to hear how your players have responded to the freedom. You've kind of, again, following Alan's lead on it, but how have your players responded to that?
What Nate just said has happened 3 times, so I don't think that's like or anything crazy. I think that really happens. It becomes a connection with that. What I would tell a coach, because these guys have answered the question, is a budget of time. We talk about the long toss, but so much time in a practice schedule, and all our limitations, and a high school coach that has been working all day, then he goes out, and there's so much he wants to get to in a course of practice. We can't forget how important it is to train the arm, and the arm needs time. So I think that's one of the biggest adjustments, to understand how everybody needs different amounts of time and how that fits into their practice structure. Because for one guy to throw properly, he has to have the right amount of time to check in, because that's his tool, that's his weapon, and that's what he needs to focus on. So time is huge for me if I'm talking to a coach and thinking about implementing some of this stuff, is giving the pitcher ample time. The second thing I do with my guys, because there's so many different ways, from learning from Alan to then we take this and put it into practice, and we implement our own deal with hopefully the players leading it at the end of the day. But check in, or what's your intentions today? And that can be before they throw. Well, my intentions today is I'm just going to really open it up, and I'm going to stay with it for a while. Or, Coach, I want to get out there. I think I'm going to feel good today. I think this is a day where I really want to have some intent coming back in. I like for them to kind of verbalize that to me. I want them to own it, but I want them to know exactly. I think having to communicate with me prior to throwing that day takes it to another step where they already have a plan of attack. And once they get into it, things can change, with how they feel. But I think time, number one, check-in is another thing that we've done that I think has been valuable that I would want to share. And then as you keep making your own, I just throw in an example. You got this whole template, you got this manual now that brings so many things together for you to get started and kind of give you some boundaries to keep you between the ditches, so to speak. But we had a guy that I just started in January. This has been the most challenging, hopefully at the end of the day, the most rewarding venture I've ever had. But just starting with the group in January, I just didn't want to tell them all they had all these flaws or you're messed up and change them before we ever started competing. So it's a very unique, weird circumstance I'm in, but I'm just now getting to some sincere adjustments. But I just now think that the ground is fertile for that. And we have a left-handed pitcher that's really overthrowing his slide. And I know, Alan, we've talked about getting out to that maximum distance and then getting back to 60 feet and being able to take that, longest throw and put it in the confines of 60 feet, 6 inches, which I love. But, we made an adjustment the other day with one person trying to find that niche for him because he overthrows his slide at 60 feet, 6 inches, and I can't get him to. And the reason why I think he overthrows his slide is, one, is command, and two is once he gets to his longest distance every day, it's a much lower slide. So his longest throw of the day, when his body is really having to gather energy and deliver over the longest distance that he wants to throw from, is actually the strongest slide is lower. So what we did was we got him to his longest distance and run a catcher out to him, 100 yards out, and put him 6 inches, and immediately, we thought that worked for him because it allowed him to remember that slot, because when we were coming back in, the slot would get higher and higher on our way back in. And so when he's back at his 60 feet, so we got all these implementations. It's great to have this template, but I just love how we can make these individual adjustments. And, all this takes time, but we're just searching for it. But it gives us a great roadmap to get to work. But time, check in, and then just keep making these constant adjustments with the guys. And I feel like I'm learning something with it all the time, and that's just an example.
It is a great resource for coaches, and that to me is when you kind of start diving into it, it's almost like you can read it 10 different times and you find something new or something makes more sense. I tell you that, guys, one of the things that jumped off to me that I thought was really an interesting concept, and it's one that, and Alan and I spoke in the earlier segment, that I don't think a lot of people understand the dynamics surrounding it. And him and I, even last night, turned in Alan from a 5-minute conversation, ended up being, like a 45-minute, but it was really talking about standing your ground. And really, as these players, come into your program and under your development, and they already have, are blessed with talent, and they've got great qualities about them, and we're working to enhance them during their college career. And then, thankfully, a Major League Baseball team sees their potential and they go into professional baseball, but they need to be able to, the concept of standing their ground in terms of what their beliefs are, like every coach has referenced, just knowing oneself. Brownie, take that question for us and run with it, man. How important was that, or how important is that to you for your player to really understand who he is, but also be able to stand his ground when he does get in front of a Major League team?
Well, I don't think it's just in front of a Major League team. I think it's here at Vanderbilt as well. I think, when we go out and recruit players and pitchers, one of the first things I tell them when they get here is that we recruited you for a reason. There's things we like that you do already. We're here to help you improve your game and build upon that. And I don't want you to forget things that you've done in the past because you think, you're at a new level and there's all these answers that are just laying out there. I certainly want you to continue to seek information and trial and error and tinker with things. And, every day you come to work here and invest is, almost a process of elimination. I think as a pitcher, you learn a lot of stuff. You see guys doing so many different things. You might try it and you say, nope, that doesn't work for me. And it almost becomes you're eliminating things to the point where you find out what works for each guy. But just to kind of build upon that is, you have stuff that you did in high school or in travel ball that leads you to here at Vanderbilt, and I want you to continue to build upon it. And then when you get to the next level, use the term stand your ground. I just think you can't forget what you've done building to that point, and it's really important. You can continue to, listen and learn, but at the same time, if somebody just strips you of your foundation, you're going to crumble. It's just the way it is.
Sure.
So it's something that you just got to hang on to. And it's a tough situation for the young man because, obviously there's superiors and you're, in an organization. But, the good ones that you've talked to are the ones that had the ability to withstand all that stuff through the building blocks of their career in the minor leagues so that they ultimately, when they got to the big leagues, they still had that, and that's the beauty of it. So, and they have to continue to do that. So I think it's, to answer that question, I think it's extremely important. And it just really boils down to everything else we talk about. It's the individual awareness of what you are and how you're built. So you can't ever lose sight of that.
Coach Yeski, same question, out to you.
Well, I think a lot of times, we recruit young men to come to our universities because we see positive qualities that they possess. And some of those young men have fewer gaps to fill. And really, I think that as you're learning to find out more information about each one of those young men, be it maybe their first couple of bullpens, and you sit back and you watch them throw and you have conversations with them about what they like and what they don't like, it gives you some more insight to help build the foundation that they're going to need to stand on. Because at some point, somebody's going to struggle. Does that mean that you just abandon everything that you've done up to that point and scrap it and start over? No. So I think that giving some young men the perspective that they need to continue to work on a daily basis to build the ground that they're standing on so that when they do choose to stand their ground, it makes it a little bit easier for them to explain to somebody why they choose to throw the breaking ball the way they do, why they choose to throw the fastball in the locations that they do, how they choose to prepare for games through their long toss or through just their band and their prep work. So each guy, I think, when they get a better sense of who they are and really what they're doing, those guys have a much better foundation to stand on, and it's easy for them, I think, at that point to really have an advanced conversation with whoever their superior might be. Maybe it's an A-ball pitching coach, maybe it's a roving guy. Maybe they're in big league camp for the first time, and some guy says, gosh, I don't know if this is really working well for you. Well, shoot, man, it's what got me here. So it doesn't mean that we scrap it. Maybe we can modify it a little bit, but ultimately, I go back to the basic level of when we show up to a field and we see a young man play, there are things that catch our attention in a good way, and I think we have to be very, very cognizant of what those things are, because we don't want to take that away from them. That's what makes them unique. That's what brought us to the field in the first place. And ultimately, I think some kids will get away from that sometimes just to appease the status quo or just appease that certain point in time. But ultimately, there have been a lot of other days, weeks, months that have led up to that you really just can't get away from at some point, because things might be a little bit difficult. And sometimes I think that the difficult conversations, they really maybe open doors to look at things a little bit different for those that may be challenging you. I know that every time we've been challenged as coaches, I think we've gotten better from it. And hopefully when kids have to stand their ground with things, they will be educated enough to explain those, because the days of the Derek Jeters and Cal Ripken comes to mind. Players generally don't play for one team their entire career. So when they bounce around, they need to know what it is that they do and how that can integrate into the environment that they're actually playing in at that time.
Butch, hopefully there's still some meat on the bone on this question. But jump in on that. Standing your ground, how important has that been for you as your players have progressed?
I'll just kind of try to wrap it up. I think that isn't that what college is supposed to be about? Isn't that what a teacher is supposed to do, is to build men? I'm sitting here thinking and listening to these guys talk. 24 years of coaching, I've probably had less than 20 big leaguers. So what are the hundreds doing? They're going on to be men, to run a corporation, to make a difference in their community. Baseball is such a great sport, and how it can teach the life principles, and that's what college was supposed to set up to be. And, I have 3 daughters. I call them strike 1, 2, and 3. But just in this short time we're spending together, I would be proud for either my sons to play for these other 2 men that I hear talking about answering these questions, because I think they're building men. And it's amazing, you can have a great career in baseball and say you reach the highest level, and the thing can be over 35 years old, and then you probably got over half your life left to live, if not more, another 50 years to contribute. So I think we're building men. I still think there's this college element, and the cool thing is we can pursue a passion through baseball and help build men. And I think all of us, the longer we coach, whether it's long toss, pitching, just our sport of baseball, we're teaching all these principles, and it gets to a really neat place when you're a teacher that you think you can combine all of those things through this journey that'll help impact them being better men. And that's why I'm so thankful and fortunate, and what baseball has meant to me, and this opportunity has been my way to make a difference, and I can see it in these other men as well.
This is the last question, guys, and I think it's an important one to discuss. And again, Alan and I went to some great detail on navigating the summer. So where does that translate to you guys as college recruiters? Well, obviously, we've seen the trend over the last 5, 6, 7 years that you guys are having to get out and evaluate players much, much sooner than your predecessors were, even 10 years ago. And so how do you, from a recruiter seat, and Butch, I'm going to give you the first platform here. How do you, from a recruiter seat, process maybe sometimes the misuse of the arm, but more importantly, the player in terms of how can you inform, can you educate that guy and give him a better navigational tool as a commitment?
Tough subject.
A loaded question, I know.
Yeah, I think that's one of our.
Come on, Butch.
That's one of our biggest elephant in the room right now.
Yeah.
Connection. It's tough. You have forces. You have forces of you need to make a decision now, or not have the opportunity to recruit. I have a 10-year-old nephew, my brother's son, and he's got an unbelievable swing, and he's a leg lift guy. And I told him, I said, leave him alone and don't let anybody coach it out of him, and take it away with getting the foot down and hands right to the ball, because he's backspinning the ball, and it's fun to watch, and you don't want that taken away from him. The throwing thing.
I think Nate's already had him on campus, Butch.
I wouldn't be surprised. He's pretty good.
Go ahead.
But, you're just, how do we even know? We go with a track record. You go with the family. You go with rental. You look at all these things. When somebody's young, what are they going to be? And somebody that's skilled has a feel of where it's going to be, and they've seen guys that age and see how they turn out. But there's so much projection. I think if anybody feels like they have a scientific recipe that this is going to turn out this way, there's so many factors that can change 50 times. But I'm looking for, you look for how a body naturally organizes, number one. Number two, you try to see the gifts of intangibles. Is it ultra competitive? Because we all play at a pretty high level, regardless of whatever level that you play at. You want the peak competitor at the level that you're playing at. So those are a couple of obvious things. But then I'm telling you, with younger players now and the recruiting that's happened so much earlier, it's almost that connection and interview with them, and you almost have to get a sense. My third component has come into play is, how's he being raised? What are not your philosophies that you can inject into them, because whatever influence you put on somebody, it might wear off in 3 weeks or be different in 6 months. You kind of want to see their structure of how they're raising their son. Are they trying to play with no phase of rest? Or are they just, are they trying to be seen by everybody in the world? Or is there a good, grounded, rock-solid approach to how they want to develop? So one of my first questions with the family, whoever has the greatest influence on the young man, is, what is that plan? I almost want a plan laid out for me instead of me laying out a plan for them.
There you go.
And how a body organizes is important for how you see that arm developing, how you see that arm health potentially looking, just from all the arms that you've worked with in the past. And I really want to feel for the plan and the comfort. You want that competitive advantage, and then I want a plan laid out for us, because that gives us a glimpse into the future on how his development's going to take place between that long time from when they're by the time they get to us. There's a lot of time there, and I'd like to have some comfort and a feel on how we're going to take care of that young person until they get to us.
Nate, what about you, man? Same question.
Well, I think when you're going out and you're looking at young men and you're trying to establish where they may fit into the group dynamic, I think you got to start out there thinking the sense of where do they fit in as a person before they fit in as a player. I think the player side of things seems to be getting easier and easier, and I don't say that to be arrogant. I just think that when you show up and you watch a young man with a 92-mile-an-hour fastball, or a guy that can get down the line pretty good, or play good center field, those things, they always catch your attention. They are, essentially what they are, but how can that young man navigate through some struggles? How's he going to fit within the dynamic of the culture that you have in your program, or even within your community? Is the place where he's going to be living the next 3 to 4 years of his time in baseball? Is that going to be something that really kind of resonates with him in a good way? And Butch touched on an important thing. What does that young man bring to the table, to make life easier for those around him? You're going to have to impact the players around you, and I think that's the one thing that we can all agree on, be it at the programs that we've been, is our better players generally have an impact on those around them, and they almost care less about themselves than they do their teammates. And they really invest a lot of time getting to know their teammates. They really invest a lot of time in trying to make them better. And at the end of the day, when you have more guys that are doing those types of things, you find out you got 5 or 6 guys looking out for you as opposed to just you looking out for yourself. And the recruiting landscape is difficult for a lot of kids. I think it's tougher for parents than it is for kids when young men may be getting an offer or making a commitment to a place when another young man or a couple other kids on the team don't necessarily have those same opportunities at that time. But that's, to me, the beauty of life and athletics, where everybody's going to develop differently. And some young men come into their own a little bit later. Some of it that happens early, and it can almost be a trap that's laid because, gosh, I was good at 16. Well, everybody else kept getting better because you decided that was enough. So that's where I think that you look at the big picture. You look at what this kid does for himself. You look at what type of teammate he is, and I think when you start putting more and more of those guys together, that's when you start having a championship caliber team, a championship caliber culture, and ultimately, again, back to Butch, he mentioned that a lot of kids, they don't get the opportunity to play in the big leagues. I know that the numbers seem to dwindle each year, especially with the involvement of the global side of baseball, with so many kids coming from different countries, and it's a challenge. So how are you going to leave this place better than you found it? And I think that when people really see that, it makes it easier to identify those kids that you want to be a part of.
Brownie, anything to expand upon there?
No, I mean, those two guys touched it up great. If I can get back to the initial question, I think you asked about like that the landscape of the summer circuit and how guys are training.
Sure.
If I remember right, if you want to run that by me again.
Well, just the changes in recruiting. I think if I'm sitting in your all's desk, if I'm sitting in Nashville, man, I'm a little on edge because I have to stay up with the times and I got to go get these kids. But at the same time, you are out of the loop on the use of that arm, and like Nate said, 92, man, I like that. I can use this kid, but then he's going to go through his now showcasing for major league teams, and you're really hoping that he shows up on campus healthy. Just can talk us through that.
Yeah, that's the biggest challenge I think for all of us outside of all these things that Butch and Nate have mentioned are extremely important, and the hard part for us is just kind of gauging those things at such a young age. You try as best you can, and you trust your gut, and your instincts, but it's really difficult to understand that. And the big thing I think that's really important is the effects of how are they training on the road when they do partake in these summer tournaments. Is sleep is never even thought about. They're spending 2 weeks at a time in a hotel with their buddies. There's not really parents around a lot of times. You don't know what kind of rest they're getting. Their nutrition is obviously, who knows? You just don't know. I know they're not eating mom's home cooked meals. So there's a lot of variables to this whole thing that can really show up later in the products that we're getting. Are they showing up on a Friday and just pitching and then being flown back home and just hanging out back at home and not doing anything in between their outings? You just really truly never know. As much as you may try to figure those things out, those are the big pieces that I really try to identify with in this process. And the unfortunate thing is, and I know probably both of these guys go through it like we do, it's just such a challenge. You don't really want to do this. It almost feels like sometimes you're getting married before you want to get married, and great feeling.
Yeah.
It really isn't, because you might like this person, and but 2, 3, 4 years sometimes down the road is are you going to feel the same about them? Are they going to evolve the same? Or the training going to be the same? And the same person? And it creates such a dynamic as a coach where it's unknowing. None of us would have married our wives under these pretenses. There's no way. But the unfortunate thing is if you don't do it, somebody else does, and then you're wondering to yourself, did I miss that guy? And the biggest thing, like these two guys mentioned, is just the continuation of growth. And the other battle that we deal with that I don't think we deal with quite as much in the past under the old format, I call it the old format, where prospects made decisions in the early parts of their senior year, is the pro platform was kind of introduced to them at the same time they were making a college decision. You really could get a better indication of where a guy's intention stood at that particular time, as far as college versus the pro level. Where now, the college decision is so far out in front, it's almost like the pro platform just becomes isolated on its own, and you really never know how the student's going to emotionally feel to your commitment to the college that they might have made 2-3 years prior to that. So there's just a lot of challenges with it, and ultimately it comes down to getting the guys that want to be part of what you have, want to be good teammates, and want to make an impact on others and grow in that, because that's what this is all about. Butch mentioned before, the development of young men in college. And money's money, but those pieces right there, that development phase of the camaraderie, the team building, having people around you that genuinely care about your growth, not only as a baseball player, but as a person, your teammates that really care about you, the strive to win championships, those things can't be replicated anywhere else other than the college level, which, you can't really put a price on. So those are the important pieces and challenges we deal with on a daily basis.
Guys, this has been just a phenomenal opportunity. I know that for Alan and I, who are sitting back listening, but I even know for you as well on the call, it's just been great to hear you, have you speak your mind on these topics. And I want to give you one, kind of final platform. And Nate, I'm going to let you kind of close us out and let each guy do the same thing. But your final thoughts: staying healthy, development, send our coaches, send our players that are listening, send them in the right direction. What are your final thoughts on those topics?
Well, I think that when you look at the players' development and the direction that they're trying to take themselves both on and off the field, there has to be balance. I don't necessarily know that in today's day and age that exists. Brownie touched on the fact that kids might be going and playing the summer circuit, and he's staying in different hotels and eating Chick-fil-A or McDonald's and whatnot. And the training aspect of it is left at that time because it's just time to play. And the balance gets lost sometimes because maybe your best pitcher is also your best shortstop, or he plays in the outfield, and there's over the course of a 4-day tournament that it can be pretty taxing for a lot of those guys. So ultimately, I think that balance that exists is take some time to get away from it. Take some time to develop, on the other side of the white lines, because the college side of it and those tools for survival are going to help you exist wherever you may lead, be it on the field or off. And the training that goes into it, I think, is very, very important. I think there are a lot of good guys out there that know what they're doing. I do think that there are some places where kids get lost because it's maybe the flavor of the month, and there are some things that don't necessarily, just because it worked for their buddy down the street who happened to be doing the program for the last 3 weeks. Well, he might be bigger and stronger to begin with, so it's completely different. But it's going to be a challenge for all kids moving forward. Baseball is becoming year-round in a lot of areas, and I think that in and of itself can be a pretty tough road to hoe for some kids, just because they're simply not prepared for it. And we have to be careful as educators and as the people that are seemingly helping direct young men, in that just because it's something that they want to do doesn't necessarily mean that it's what's best for them at that time. I mentioned my daughter earlier. She would like to have chocolate milk pretty much around the clock. And, at times that might be good for her, other times not so much. And you got to pick your battles with some of these places and these kids to really help kind of show them the way that might be best for their overall development.
Coach Brown, same idea. Final thoughts on all this?
Well, I think, the biggest thing is this is the individual's experience, and, what you want to get out of this experience, short-term, long-term. You have to take ownership for that, and that might be, playing 3 sports in high school. It might be, going and hanging out with the girls at the senior prom, and all these important pieces to developing as an individual that sometimes get lost in the specialization of this training. And I have 4 young kids now. I'm like Butch. I got 3 daughters. I just don't know what to call 2 twins. I can't call them strike 1, strike 2, and strike 3. So I have to figure that out. But maybe you can help me when we're done with this call. But at the end of the day, I want their life and their experience to be what they really want to do and help them, find the road, because there is no pause button in life. There really isn't, and you really got to immerse yourself right where you are at that particular time, and get the most out of it. And and it can't just be short term. I really get. I really hits a bone with me when I hear about some coaches asking the star quarterback to you probably shouldn't play this fall football because you got a real chance to be special in baseball. And I sit there and say to myself, God, senior year of high school, star quarterback, there might not be a better 3 months in your life. It's going to be one of those moments that you look back on, and you don't want to lose out on those opportunities. So it's just the biggest thing going forward is to these. To coaches out there and to players is just enjoy the experience you have right now. There's nothing guaranteed about tomorrow. Nothing. None of us have that. And just enjoy it as much as you can. Seek as much information as you can. Be right where you are. If you're training, train to the best of your ability. Get what you want out of it. If you're hanging out with your buddies, get what you want out of it. All right? And don't be losing sight of that. Those are the most important pieces.
Butch, try to follow all that up.
Okay.
He will. Butch will sum it up.
But yeah,
I just when I get started, I just think about everything I've learned from today, and it's just been this has been so much energy for me. This has been reassuring to me, and felt great being around these guys. And this is from a throwing manual, but it teaches so much more. It's first thing I got from the throwing manual, and I appreciate you, Alan, so much for doing this and putting it together, because it gives somebody an opportunity to have a plan. Because I think we know from the time that I've spent with you and some of these others and with players, the best have a desire to throw. I think I've heard that through this experience today. There's a simplification that takes place. Trust your influence. I think everybody I've heard has talked about you becoming your biggest influence. And that's what you want to do at the end of the day to build a man. Because these guys, especially these young guys, we start talking about freshmen and sophomores in high school, and then you start talking about guys becoming so-called prospects. They have so many more influences than when I came through. We talked earlier about when to make a decision for college, and I played my senior of high school baseball. It was over, and then like the next couple of days, all right, what am I going to do next? And how that landscape has changed from 1988 to all these influences these guys have. And for us to be able to take something, as a coach and try to get these guys to simplify the influence to them trusting themselves, I think is powerful. And with all of this, I'm trying to make the best me. You're trying to make the best you, but you're really trying to fit into a team. We're not playing singles golf like I'm watching the Masters every day a couple of weeks ago, because the Masters is pretty cool. But we're trying to fit into a team concept. That can never be lost. But I just think the manual is a great way from just taking the throwing, but then because of the way the concepts are, you can apply it to so many other things, from training, from time off to who you want to be, from taking ownership. It's just more powerful than picking up a ball and throwing for 2 minutes at this distance. Or it really opened up a whole other world to me, and I thank you for that, and thank you for allowing me to be involved.
Coming right back to you, Alan. Take us home.
Well, that's even tougher now to follow that up, even though my mom's an English teacher and told me tougher is not a word, so I have to say more difficult. I think there's really nothing to add from what these guys have just stated so clearly, and they're so articulate with this. And I think for me, I would just revisit one topic that we didn't really get into a whole lot that you and I had just talked about, because I feel like when these kids get to campus, with the coaches in general, I feel like a lot of the points that were made today, they're going to be treated well. They're going to learn about life skills, about becoming a man, everything that the three guys have talked about. I think what concerns me the most is when they're away from, Butch and Brownie and Nate, and they have to navigate the summertime. They have to go out there on, prove themselves or be in front of professional scouts. And I think the one thing I would just want to, check back in with on as my final point is that I think these kids, if they listen to this discussion, they're going to get great insight as far as, what to expect from going to any of these universities. But I just hope that they really get clear on what they do in the summertime, because that has become a potentially dangerous landscape now with what I call the starting and the stopping, of 1 week on and 2 weeks off and 3 weeks on and two. I mean, it's just, I think Brownie may have mentioned something about, or Nate, about the sleep. I mean, there's so many factors that go into the summertime. And I think that when I wrote this manual, I wanted to obviously cover the obvious, the off-season build-up, the in-season maintenance, rest periods. And obviously, as you guys all know, there's always flexibility in anything I believe in. But I think what really hit me that made this manual even more unique is just to hit on the summer and just really try to come up with a plan where in the summertime, which again I just feel like is possibly the most vulnerable time now for these kids, and the parents and the coaches that are part of the summer program. These kids have an idea. Going back to what everybody's echoed today, they have an idea of what it really means to listen to their arm. They have an idea of what it means, what makes them tick, and I just hope that summer piece of how to navigate it is something that they really can get a lot more out of this manual, because I just don't think people are really talking about what do you do in the summer and how do you navigate it. And if I pitch in Minnesota on this day and then San Diego on that day, but I pitched all the way through June with my playoffs with my high school, how much time do I take off, and then when do I build up again, and then there's scout ball in the fall, and so there's so many variables really from, let's say, June 1st to potentially December 1st for high school players especially. I think I just want to crystallize that last point, that I just hope that the summer is something that people out there know that there is a huge piece to this manual that really gets into how to best negotiate, or what we talked about, navigate the summer. So, and then just lastly, I'm just so grateful, Jeremy, for you doing this. But really, I called Butch and Nate and Brownie on very, very short notice and see if they could rally to do this. And it's a very, very busy time of year for all of them. And I just want you guys each to know, and I'll be telling you this privately at a different time too, but I'm eternally grateful that you made time to do this, because you guys have so much to offer. You come from such an authentic place. Your track record speaks for itself, but you're just better people. And so for me, even though I love the idea of getting this manual out because I've worked so hard on it, at the end of the day, I think just the support from friends and the fact that we're all talking about topics that we all care about, because at the end of the day, we all want this game of baseball to move forward, and we're all doing our best. And so, as a closing remark, I just want to say thanks to everybody for doing this and helping to support me in the manual, but more importantly, of course, we're just supporting the game.
Could not have said it better myself. I think I'll take the opportunity, obviously, to thank you guys. This has been selfishly just sitting here as a young coach. I'm sitting here learning along with, but I'm excited about what this information will do to the guys who listen in. This is going to be phenomenal. Audio gold, and I'll use the opportunity as well. Your class of 2034. All right, I'm a few years down the road, Butch, but I got a 3-month-old that's throwing about 85 right now. I'm excited about where he's going. He's J-banding it every day. So stay with me. I'll get some videos to you guys very soon. But guys, thank you so much for being on the call, and obviously, even specifically for Cooper, man, I would love for him to play for a guy like any of you three, and just appreciate what you're doing for the game and helping the ABCA. And we obviously wish you luck the rest of the year, and we look forward to hearing from you very soon.
Thank you very much.
Again.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you.
Good luck to you guys too, Butch and Nate, down the stretch here.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Appreciate it.
Good luck to you guys as well. And Alan, I think I speak for all of us when we say we wouldn't be able to do what we're doing without people like yourself and putting things like this together, and certainly the time that you've invested not only in us but in other individuals that are making this game and everything that goes with it that much better. So we appreciate you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I appreciate all you guys. And, again, it just means so much that you guys take time out of your schedule to participate in this. It's just awesome. I don't even know what the word is. Gratified. We'll start with gratified, but I have a few more I'll come up with later.
It's awesome. Thanks again, guys, for being on. We'll talk to you soon.
What a great way to kick off our very first Calls from the Clubhouse podcast with such a spectacular group of baseball men. We sincerely want to thank Alan Jaeger, Nate Yeske, Scott Brown, and Butch Thompson for being so forthcoming on today's topics, but also taking time out of their busy schedules to join us. Please take a look at our website, abca.org. We hope, if you haven't already, join one of the over 8,000 baseball coaches around the world who are passionate ABCA members. We also hope we see you out in Anaheim, California, January 5th through the 8th of 2017 at the world's largest baseball convention. Again, thank you for listening in to Calls from the Clubhouse. We hope to hear from you soon. And until then, thank you for what you do for the game of baseball.